All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another fun adventure with Lisa Dougherty. I will turn it over to her right away. Oh, one
Thank you.
quick thing. If you have questions, we've got a full house, so please type your questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I will funnel them to Lisa when we have little pauses in her presentation. Okay,
All
now
right.
I'm done.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tanea, and thank you to the Clifton Park Library again for hosting me and allowing me to do this. It's kind of become a regular thing, which is great. Today's presentation about ancestry. This is sort of an outgrowth from questions that I would get. Probably one of the more, a more popular series of questions that I would get when I was doing my in-person sessions was people would express frustration with Ancestry and the overload of information that comes from there, and how do I find what I want on Ancestry? It certainly is something that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of patience. It's definitely a learned kind of thing. In this case, I would say more is better. The more you use it, the better you're going to get at your searching, and the more effective your searches are going to get. That being said, I always like to say that for me, even after being an Ancestry member for 20 years or so, I still feel like 7 out of every 10 search that I do is unsuccessful. And, the reason for that is not because I'm a lousy searcher or not because the information isn't there. It's just basically because it's trying to find the right combination of ingredients to make that search successful. So when you are searching, you just need to use the right combination. You need to be persistent. You need to practice. So those are the kind of main themes of today. But what I'm going to tell you, or what we're going to talk about, are some of the strategies that I use on a regular basis to search Ancestry. I have to say I probably use Ancestry every day of my life. Unless I'm on vacation or unless I'm somewhere where there's no computer access, then I am always on Ancestry. So these ideas come from years of experience. So the big question is, what about Ancestry, and what is it about Ancestry that makes it the popular site that it is? What is it about this site, and why do so many people talk about it, and why do we use it? Well, it's definitely the largest family history resource on the internet, and it's been around since 1997. So it's got a pretty long history in the history of the internet and in the history of genealogy on the internet. Some statistics: over 13 billion records are online at Ancestry. There's 7,500 unique data collections. There are 2.7 million subscribers worldwide. They're performing 75 million searches per day. And then there's also the user-created family trees, 26 million user-created family trees. And also Ancestry has the largest DNA database. So these are just a few of the reasons why Ancestry has the collection that it does. And of course, with these numbers, billions, millions, all of these big numbers, you can imagine that with all of this to go through, you have to be able to narrow it down somehow to be able to find what you're looking for. It's not a matter of just plugging your name in and searching. You've got to be able to narrow it down. So when we're talking about the records on Ancestry, a very, very basic overview of what types of things are available on Ancestry. These would be just the larger record sets. Of course, there's going to be an seemingly infinite number of other types of records that you can search. But the main types of records that you would be searching on Ancestry would be United States Census from 1790 to 1940. Next year, we'll get the 1950 census out, which will be really exciting. The United Kingdom and Canada census records. Immigration records, those include passenger lists, naturalization records, passport records, those types of things. Military records from all wars, Revolutionary, Civil War, World War II, World War I. The user-submitted family trees that we just discussed a little bit. And I've got military records on there twice. Okay, well, I better fix that. Directory and member lists. So things like city directories, which are the precursors to phone books. Member directories of certain professions or clubs. Those kinds of things can be searched on Ancestry. So this is just a real basic overview of the types of records that you're searching. So how do I access it? Okay, so there are a couple of options for accessing Ancestry. You can, of course, purchase your own subscription. There's a couple of different levels that you can purchase it at. The levels determine the types of records you have access to. So if you have a United States membership, then you can only access United States records. If you have a World Explorer membership, then you can access worldwide records. Of course, with the more records you can access, the higher the price. So the prices are quite varied. Some people sign up for it months at a time, a month at a time. Some people sign up for it for 6 months. I normally do a yearly subscription. Another option is that there is a library edition of Ancestry that is available in our local libraries. And of course, right now, we know that a lot of our local libraries are closed and they're not accessible, but some of them are offering Ancestry remotely from home. You would have to check with the library that you have a card with to see if they are offering at-home access to their subscription. Others, I know sometimes you can go to their parking lots and use their Wi-Fi, and you can get on their subscription in that way as well. So just definitely check with whatever library you are using locally that you have a card with to see if they are offering the library edition access during the pandemic. So my tip number one, we're going to go into a series of tips here. My tip number one, search an individual database. So one of the temptations that we have when we're looking at Ancestry and when we go into Ancestry and we get on that search page, one of our temptations is, I want to find out about my ancestor, William Jones. So we go in and we put William Jones's name in those boxes, first and middle name, William, last name, Jones, and we might put a place where he lived. Okay, well, he lived in New York, so I'm going to put New York in there. So if we do a search on that search page, a general search, I'm sure that you can imagine how many hits for William Jones we're going to get. We're going to get a very large number of hits. And even if you feel ambitious enough to start digging through that list and seeing if any of those William Joneses are the one you're looking for, you might get down to maybe the end of the first page, or you might get down to the end of the second page, and then you'll be like, oh, I can't do this. This is way too many. I can't go through all these. I've got to figure out a way to narrow it down. Well, one thing that I recommend is to search an individual database rather than the entire website of Ancestry. So, for example, if you want to know about your ancestor, William Jones, and you know that he was alive in 1940, well, why not look for him in the 1940 census? A good approach to doing research anyway, in general, is to work from the most recent record to the most past record. So if we're going to research William Jones, we'll start in 1940 because that's the latest census that we're able to look at. So we would go to where we can get access to the 1940 federal census, and that is going to be available through a couple of different means, which we can go through at some point. And you can search your exact database. That way, if you're searching William Jones, even if you don't know a lot about him, you at least can narrow it down to a more manageable level than the thousands of hits you're going to get other than a general search. So I encourage you to use the card catalog on Ancestry to find individual databases, or to use the categories on Ancestry to find individual databases. The card catalog search is especially effective because you can use keywords to find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for things that are only in the state of Pennsylvania, you can use the word Pennsylvania. If you're looking for things that only have to do with Ireland, you can put Ireland in the search, and that will bring up databases with Ireland in the title or in the description. So the card catalog search can definitely be your friend. So what I mean when I say don't let records hold you hostage, if you have a goal in mind when you start your research, it's going to help you to stay focused. When we go in and we just start looking for William Jones and we just kind of put his name in, we don't have a focus. We want to say, okay, my goal for this research today is to find out what year William Jones was born and where he was born. So that's a clear goal. You've made a clear goal. If you have a clear goal, it will help you to stay focused. It will also determine what type of search you do. So if you're looking for William Jones's place and date of birth, the census might be a good place to start, because that's going to help you to narrow down his year of birth and the state or country that he was born in. So that's going to give you more information that than you would have going in. When you have done your search and when you have either found something or not found something, make sure you write it down. Write it down on a pad of paper, save it to your tree, whatever you need to do to record that search. That way you'll know you've searched there and that you've either found something or you've not found something. So clear goals help us to keep our focus and help us to determine what types of records we want to search in. So performing more effective searches. Again, our temptation is to just put William Jones in and hit the search bar and see what we get. But there are a couple of different types of searches that you may find to be more effective. One of the things that happens with us a lot of times is we deal with spelling of names. And of course, spelling of names we know has a lot of factors, and the spelling of names could be its own presentation. But one of the things that we have to deal with is we have to deal with not only the way we spell the name, but the way that someone might have spelled the name who was actually putting together the record, or how someone would have spelled the name who was doing the indexing of the record. So we have a lot of layers to go through in order to be able to find what we're looking for. So fortunately, Ancestry and other sites as well use what they call a wildcard search. And a wildcard is basically that little star that you see after the FRA and the POL. That little star takes the place of other letters. So what we can do is we can tell Ancestry that we are looking for every person in this database whose first name begins with FRA and whose last name begins with POL. So it doesn't matter what comes after those first three letters. We just want to have people returned that meet those criteria. This is a very effective search for times when you don't know how a name is going to be spelled. Or in the first case of in the case of the first name here, the person's name was Frank. But how do we know if he's going to be referred to as Frank or as Francis? We don't know. So therefore, we want to put the FRA and the star, and it will give us Francis, Franklin, Frank, all of those things when the search is returned. The surname in this case is Polchapek. That's a tough last name to spell, and it's spelled in many different ways. But I can be fairly certain that it probably will begin with POL. Conversely, you can also use the wildcard in the middle of a name. You can also use it at the beginning of the name. As long as there are 3 characters either before it or after it, you can use the wildcard to take the place of other letters. So a wildcard search can be incredibly effective. It gives you a good list of things to choose from when your results are returned. Another thing that I like to do is I like to do what I call a name combination search. Now, this is my name for it. I don't know if it actually has an official name, but this is what I call it. Sometimes when you're dealing with a problematic last name, you're dealing with something that you know is going to be spelled many different ways. Sometimes you can find your ancestor by simply searching first names. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, that you can actually search in any of the fields in these search boxes. You don't have to fill in all of them. You can even fill in just one of them. You don't have to, there is no default here. You can leave any of them blank. So the combination search, one of the things I like to do is, okay, I know that my ancestor's name was Stanley. And I know that his parents' names were Frank and Mary. But I know that he's got a really long last name, and it's a name that's subject to a lot of misspelling. So I'm just going to search for a person named Stanley with the parents Frank and Mary. You could also add to this a location. You could put lived in. So if you know that your ancestor lived in Albany, New York, you could put that in there. If you know that Stanley was born in Massachusetts, you could put that in there and to further narrow it down. But don't be afraid to put data in and out as you search. But the name combination search can be extremely effective. especially if you're dealing with a fairly uncommon name. If you've got a child named John and his parents' names are John and Mary, well, it may not be as effective. But if you have a child that has a slightly unusual name, then that might work better. And also in conjunction with a location, it could possibly work fairly well. So speaking of location, another good way to search is a location search. Sometimes we're searching in a relatively small community, and the community of Schodack in Rensselaer County would certainly qualify as a small community. And maybe we know that our ancestor was an immigrant or our ancestor came from another state. And we think, okay, well, in Schodack, how many people could be living in Schodack that were born in Germany? You know, maybe there's quite a few, maybe there's not. Or, you know, how many people live in Schodack that maybe were born in the state of Delaware? Maybe not many. So if you are certain about your ancestor's birthplace and maybe know a little bit about their birth year, doing a location search like this will bring up a list of all of the individuals that fit this criteria. So if you know your ancestor lived in Schodack and they were born about 1875 in Germany, you can do this search. And what will be returned to you is a list of names of people living in Schodack who fit this criteria. So this can be a very effective way of finding people. You're not even using a name at all. You're just using the locations. So definitely give this a try when you're looking in your next database. Another one that I like to use is the parents born combination. So here we have Frank. And Frank was born in New York about 1875, but we know that Frank's mother was born in Canada. And if Frank is living in a place like Schodack, maybe there's not a lot of Franks with mothers born in Canada. So you can see how you are using this search of places to narrow down the possibilities of what you can find in a particular database. Sometimes this works really well too if the parents of the child that you're looking for, or if the person you're looking for had an unusual combination of parents. Now, often we see things like both parents born in New York or both parents born in Ireland. But if you have a combination, maybe like one parent born in Ireland and the other parent born in, say, Germany, that might be a fairly unique combination that might give you some information. So don't be afraid, again, to use these different fields in different creative ways. It's kind of thinking of a way to use it in a way that's not conventional, that's going to get you the information that you want. So another common mistake that people make is that they think they see a blank space, they've got to fill it in. That's not going to be a very effective search strategy, because what that's going to do is that's going to tell the Ancestry search engine that you want something that fits all of these criteria. So when Ancestry sees these fields filled in, Ancestry's thinking, oh, all of these have to fit. So the more information there is in there, the less you're going to get back, because Ancestry is looking at this as a computer will with very preciseness. They're looking and saying, okay, all of these things have to match. And if not all of these things match, you're probably going to end up with very little as far as return goes. If you can see underneath the names, there are the little check marks that say exact. Ancestry allows us to either do an exact search, and when we say exact, it means exact. So it's going to only return things to us that match exactly what we have in those boxes. We can uncheck exact up at the top where it says match all terms exactly. You can uncheck that. And what that will do is it will give you a fuzzy search. It will give you things that reasonably match these things that you have put in. It's still good practice, though, to not fill in all of the fields. Fill in the fields that you feel most strongly about. In that case, I would say the names, the first name, the last name, an approximate birth year, maybe a birth country, and maybe a location where they live as far as state goes. That would probably be, for a general search, what I would do. So the best success happens when we rotate data in and out of our search engines. So if we start with Frank Polchapek, born in 1875, living in New Bedford, we we can go and take things in and out. So if we do that search and we don't get anything we can work with, maybe we'll take the New Bedford out because maybe he's not living in New Bedford. Or maybe we'll take the Polchapek out because maybe his last name is spelled so badly that we can't find him. So we would take in, take out, and put in different types of information as we do searches. Searching is a matter of not just one and done. Searching is a matter of tweaking it, constantly tweaking it. Okay, that search didn't work. Let's take out this and try it. Okay, that search didn't work. Let's put this in and try it. So searching is a matter of rotating data in and out. Probably number one detriment to successful searches is because people give up too soon. You've got to be persistent. You've got to keep working it. Giving up too soon is, like I said, 7 out of 10 searches are unsuccessful. If you only do 5 searches, chances are pretty good that 5 of them are going to be unsuccessful. If you do 10 searches, you are increasing your chance that you're going to find something that you want. So the moral of the story is just keep trying. Yes, of course, not all of us have forever to be able to do this. But even if you sit down and just do a little bit every day, you are learning. And I also think that there is value in unsuccessful searches because they help you to understand the search engine better. They help you to understand what works and what doesn't work. They help you to think about, okay, well, that search was successful this time. Maybe the next time I'm searching for someone else, I can use that same search. So there is value in an unsuccessful search. All right, so what about those hints? Everybody knows about Ancestry's hints, those crazy things with the leaves that shake at you every time you open up your tree. Hints are hints. Hints are not facts. Hints are there to give you a hint. They're there to maybe say, hey, look at this. This might be your ancestor. Nowhere do they say, hey, this hint is absolutely 100% true. You should just accept it blindly without looking at it. Hints can be very, very kind of annoying, actually. I mean, I know that there are people who go into Ancestry and their eye immediately goes up to the green hint in the corner of their Ancestry page and sees that there's thousands of hints up there that they haven't looked through, and they get bothered by that. You can learn to ignore it. I ignore it pretty well. But hints are there for you to review. They're there for you to look at. They're there for you to get some suggestions about what might be correct about your ancestor. It's not a perfect system. It's meant to help you out. It's meant to increase your skills as a researcher. It's meant for you to have a little push forward instead of you having to make it all up yourself. So if you think of a hint as a hint, and you think of it as something that's optional, it's not something you even need to look at if you don't want to, think of it as optional, then maybe that would help you to understand and to accept the hints a little bit more. So Ancestry gives you hints in 4 different categories. So here I've got a total of 10,000 different hints. And they come from all these different places. They come from records, they come from photos, they come from stories, they come from members' trees. So all of these are potential sources of hints. One of the things that I advise people who are having a hard time dealing with hints is I advise people to turn off the hints to people's trees. That can be one of the hugest data suckers in the world, because as you can see in this table, there are 1,580 hints to other people's trees. I advise people that if you are interested in learning about how to deal with hints, definitely turn them off. And another reason why turning them off is effective is because there's a huge amount of inaccuracy in the online family trees. I believe the last estimate that I read somewhere was that 80% of the information in the online trees is incorrect. So with that said, you probably wouldn't look at records that were 80% inaccurate when you were doing your family tree. Do we have a question?
We do.
Awesome.
Somebody asks, how do you turn off hints?
That's coming. Okay, so you would, if you had the option, you would not look at records that were not going to be helpful to you with your family tree. So why would you look at ancestry trees that may very well be not good information and also just add to the confusion that you're already feeling. So here's how we turn off hints. So if you can, and feel free to take a screenshot of this if this will help you. Go into the tree settings and then into the hint preferences, site preferences. And then you go into the hint preferences where it says Ancestry Member Tree Hints. You're going to uncheck the little gray box that you see at the bottom. It defaults to being checked. So when you create a tree, your tree is automatically defaulted to give you hints from other people's trees. You have to manually go in and turn it off. And this is how you do it. So I recommend that using other people's trees is not good practice. If you are working on your tree and you get stuck and you really can't find anything and you want to go into people's trees and use them as hints, then search the public member family trees yourself. Don't rely on hints. They're just going to end up confusing you, and they're just going to end up making things way more cumbersome for you to go through. So make it a deliberate act on your part. If you want to check out people's family trees, go in and do it yourself, and don't rely on Ancestry to do it. And in the long run, you will become a better searcher if you're doing your own searches rather than just taking things off of people's trees. That's how bad information gets disseminated over and over and over again. So become a better searcher by doing your own searches. All right, another really good tip is that you always want to consult the actual record image. Now, sometimes what happens when we're searching and we find a particular record about our ancestor, we find this lovely, beautiful transcribed portion of the record. Like, think, oh, this is great. This is my ancestor. This is John Henry Macaulay. I wanted to know what his birth date is. I want to know all of this stuff. And it's wonderful. I found him in the World War I draft registration. Here's all the information. Well, that's not correct. This is not all of the information. This is only the amount of information that has been transcribed for the index. So it's good practice to look at the actual handwritten record. And I can see we have another question, Tanea. I'm watching this chat box.
Yep, it says, how can you narrow down to find someone that may have been born around 1870 and you have his name and parents' name? This person was shot and died when he was about 15. I've tried several searches.
Okay, well, I'll help you at the end. I'll help you at the end with some suggestions. Okay, so we want to know all we can know about John Macaulay. We don't want to just look at this transcribed stuff. So we would open up the record image. I would always recommend to you that you look at the record image. I can tell you from experience that sometimes I have clients who will provide me with some information about their ancestor, and what they give me is a copy of a transcribed record from Ancestry. And I say to myself, okay, well, you're probably missing a lot of information if you're not looking at the actual image. So in the registration card, we can see that there's a bunch of different information in here that's not included on the transcribed copy. Like, for example, his occupation, who he's working for, his nearest relative. What if that's somebody that we need to confirm our research? We don't know that if we don't look at the actual record image. So there are advantages and disadvantages to transcriptions. Of course, without transcriptions, we wouldn't have indexes. Without indexes, we wouldn't be able to find what we're looking for very easily. But the original record is always going to give you more information. Transcription might be easier to read if you don't read handwriting. You can format it way easier for printing, and it's probably going to be much easier to read when it's printed. But what you're really getting with a transcription is you're getting somebody's interpretation of the handwriting. Whoever indexed that record looked at the record and made their determination about what was written there. If you don't look at the actual record, you're taking somebody's word for what it says. So I don't know about you, but I like to make my own judgments. And I like to look at things and I like to say, oh, okay, that doesn't say what the transcription says. That says something else. This is my opinion, and it differs from what the transcriptionist's opinion was. Oftentimes, in order to save space and to not overload search engines, records are only partially transcribed. The important information for indexing is the part that's transcribed. So the name, the date, those types of things are transcribed enough to make it part of an index. So that doesn't give you the complete information. If you look at an original record, you're going to see the information as it was recorded. You're going to see how the person who was taking down the information wrote it. You are going to make your own interpretation of what the handwriting says. It's interesting because just as a side note, and with reading handwriting, I will see on Facebook groups, there's a lot of people that have very difficult time with handwriting. And it's something that we all have a difficult time with when we first start out, but the more you practice, the better you will get at. So definitely hang in there and keep trying to interpret handwriting. You will also see all of the information that the record contains. You're not going to see just what's indexed. And the other thing that you're going to see, and this is especially true of things like census records or baptism records, you're going to see the record in the context of which it was created. So if you're only looking at a transcription of a census record, you're only seeing the information about the household that you are looking up. So if you're looking up William Jones, you're only going to see the members of his household in the transcription. If you don't look at the actual page, how do you know that his in-laws are living next door? You're not going to see that unless you look at the actual page. So you can miss an awful lot if you don't look at the original record. So another thing that we can do to make searching effective is use the fan club. And when we're looking at original records, we have more awareness of the fan club. The fan club is defined by genealogist Elizabeth Shown Mills as friends, associates, and neighbors. Now, of course, we know that our ancestors didn't just live in a bubble. They didn't just live by themselves in a house in the middle of nowhere with nobody around them. Most of our ancestors lived in a tight-knit community with family, with friends, with people that they had everyday dealings with. Back before people were very highly mobile and lived all over the country, they had neighborhoods, they had close-knit communities. And so those friends, associates, and neighbors are going to be able to tell you a lot about your ancestor that you're not going to be able to know if you only look at them. I work a lot with Irish people. So one of the things that happens with Irish ancestors is that they tend to live, when they come to the United States, they tend to live with people that they lived with in Ireland. So they tend to live with familiar people, not only their family members, but also people that are their friends, people that they work with. They tend to live in a close-knit community. And what happens is when you're looking at your Irish ancestor and you can't find information about him because he died very young or something like that, you may be able to find information about a person who was related to him. And the only way you're going to know that is if you are looking into the fan club. So definitely be aware of information about friends, associates, and neighbors. There are lots of places to find fan club members. Again, you're going to have your neighbors from census records. They're going to be baptism sponsors and marriage witnesses. Because of course, you know, when you have a child and you have them baptized, you're not going to pick any Tom, Dick, and Harry to be a sponsor. You're going to pick someone who is closely related to you. Also, naturalization witnesses. They were often neighbors or people that someone worked with. Survivors mentioned in obituaries. City directory listings. One of the things that has happened with searching is that it makes it fairly easy to search for people within a city directory at the same address. So if you want to know, you know that your ancestor lived at 116 Willow Street in 1880, and you want to know who else lived there, you can put 116 Willow Street in the search engine, and it will bring up anybody else that lived at the same address. So that helps you to find people that might be related. All right, so if you're using DNA as evidence, and of course, these days, a lot of people are using DNA. DNA can be very helpful, or it can be more confusing, or it can be a combination of both. If you're using DNA as evidence, I would urge you to use the shared matches. If you have not used shared matches yet, this is a very powerful tool. So what happens when you go into your match list and you pick out someone who matches you, anybody at all, and you go into their shared matches list. And what it tells you is it's telling you that all of the people on this list share DNA with both you and all of these other people. So for example, this person that I pulled up, it was someone that I didn't know who they were. And I went into the shared matches, and I can see now that this person also matches my mother and also matches my sister. So because this person matches my mother, I automatically know that she's on my mother's side. So I've already eliminated half of my DNA matches from my father's side. So now I know she's not on my father's side. If I go further down, I might be able to see if she's related to some of my first cousins, and that would eliminate another side. So you can use the shared matches tool to be able to narrow down who people are. And that allows you to look at their trees and to make some comparisons. If you have an Ancestry subscription, you are able to look at the trees of your matches. And if you are looking at shared matches, you can narrow down further where that person belongs, and possibly their tree may contain some information that you can use. So shared matching is a very powerful tool to use. So one thing I wanted to point out that I'm not sure that a lot of people even realize, the New York State Vital Records Index, it's available on Ancestry. And when I first put this presentation together, this was a brand new thing, and now it's been on there for a while, but it is still something that a lot of people are not aware of. It is an index, which means all it has on it are names and places and dates. So it does not have the information like the parents' names or where the person was born or how old the person is. It only just has bare index information. However, this is incredibly useful because we all know in New York State that vital records are not public. They're not something that we can just go to the website and get. We have to actually send for them. But the index allows you to discover whether a certain event occurred in a certain place and on a certain date. So this can be incredibly useful for when you want to find out where and when someone died, was born, or got married. And keep in mind that the dates vary from about the early 1880s and up to access in the late 60s for marriages, the 40s for births, and the 50s for deaths. These are only indexes. They are the indexes to the records held by the New York State Department of Health. Currently, the requests are over 2 years, so I wouldn't bother with them. But you can sometimes get a record from the community where the event occurred. For example, I recently requested a couple of death certificates from the city of Troy, and they arrived within 2 weeks. So it is possible to get them from the municipalities. This index does not include New York City. So if you were looking for New York City records, that's a whole other animal, and that is not included in this index. And also for local people, be aware that Albany is not included until 1913. And that also goes for the city of Yonkers and Buffalo as well. So those cities are not included, just in case you're looking in those places. Here's what a sample index looks like. One from 1909 on the left, and the other one is a little bit later. I can't even read what the year is, but that one is a little bit later. You can see the readability varies quite a bit. One of the things that I should point out is that the index is very poorly done. If you are searching the index, you need to look at the actual images because there's a lot of really strange place names in the index, things that really just don't exist in New York State. So you really need to look very carefully at the entry before you make a determination as to if this is the ancestor that you're looking for. And the state file numbers are also very hard to read on some of the scans. So you just need to be very careful. All right, so we can't get everything we need on Ancestry. We know that. We know that there's a lot of other resources. There's a lot of other resources online. You know, these are probably things that are very familiar to all of us. Family Search, we know, is free. Other pay sites like Find My Past, MyHeritage, newspapers.com. All of these are also other resources. You may find unique things on some of these websites that you're not going to find on Ancestry. So if you are looking in a certain place, it's always a good idea to check out what type of collections these websites have before you spring for a pay subscription. Cindy's List can be incredibly helpful. Cindy's List is a website that has categories of genealogy websites listed on it. So if you're looking for a particular type of genealogy website, you can find it on Cindy's List. Of course, we use Google for just about everything. Google can be a very incredibly useful and very powerful search engine. Speaking of Cindy, from Cindy's List, she has a lecture out there called Googling for Your Grandma. And if you can find that on YouTube, that would be a really great talk to watch because she's got a lot of great ideas for using Google. Newspaper resources. If you're looking for information about a certain person, especially in this area, I highly recommend the Fulton History website. Can be a little quirky to use, but it's got a lot of great resources. Also, New York Historic Newspapers has different types of newspapers on it. And then Genealogy Bank, which is a pay site. Social media. Social media is a great resource for genealogy. Facebook genealogy groups can be wonderful for information, for resources, for any questions that you have. Definitely, I would join a Facebook genealogy group. There are thousands of them from all different topics. Then there are local resources. A lot of these, unfortunately, are closed at the moment. But there are things that we can do to help. You can go to some of the presentations from the local genealogy groups. I know the Capital District Genealogical Society has monthly Zooms. So does Troy Irish Genealogy Society. They're always interested in helping people. They're interested in taking questions. So if you reach out to any of them, they can certainly be helpful. Some of these places hopefully will be opening again this year coming up. And then we can get back to doing on-site research. But again, this is something that's just sort of in the works, we hope. Okay, so I know we did have the one question, and if you could just read that to me again, Tanea.
Sure. How can you narrow down to find someone that may have been born around 1870 and you have his name and parents' name? This person was shot and died when he was about 15. I have tried several searches. Okay,
the first thing I would probably do is try to see if I could find a newspaper account of what went wrong and how the whole thing went down. If there's, you can use some of those search sites like Fulton History if it's in New York or in the Northeast, or newspapers.com if it's in a different area of the country. I would do a search with the name in quotes. So if the name is William Jones, I would put the name William Jones in quotes, and I would put the year of the incident and maybe the place where it happened. So that would be the first one. The other thing is if the person died in a place where it might be a death certificate might be another source. So depending on what state it was and when exactly it happened, you may be able to find a death certificate, which would give you further information. When a person dies so young, it's so hard because you can't often find them on census records. It can be difficult. If this person was born in 1870, like you're saying, or around 1870, and if they were in New York State, you might want to try the 1875 New York State Census. You might find them in that. Again, that's going to depend on if they were in New York.
Thanks, Lisa. I have somebody with a raised hand, Pamela, so I'm going to allow Pamela to talk.
Okay.
You just need to unmute yourself, Pamela.
Actually, that was a mistake when I was going to chat, so you can ignore that.
Okay, thank you anyway. I've also got somebody who's participating by phone, so let me allow that person to talk.
Excellent.
And go ahead, caller, if you have any questions. You just have to unmute yourself.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
All right, that doesn't seem to be
not working.
Okay, well, sorry about that. If you do have questions, you've got Lisa's email address right there on the screen as well.
Yes.
So
definitely.
Sorry we can't reach you right now.
Yep. Yeah, any questions anybody thinks of, let me know. I just saw another one come up.
Yep. When Ancestry only has the transcribed record. Oh, I see two, sorry.
Excellent.
Well, I'll do this one first. When Ancestry only has the transcribed record, I found the original record sometimes by looking at the source information below.
Great idea. Very good idea. Yeah. Ancestry is pretty good about putting the source information in. That's not something that a lot of us check with any regularity, but we probably should be. So definitely that's a really good way of actually getting the real and getting your hands on the real record. So that's a wonderful tip. Thank you.
And another question, can you print records off of Ancestry?
Yes, absolutely. You can print them. Like I alluded to in the presentation, the transcribed version of the record is probably going to be better printed because you're not going to have to deal with things like a light scan or a dark scan or unreadable handwriting. So if you do need to print something, possibly printing the transcribed version is better than nothing at all. What I usually tell people is rather than printing the record, download the record and put it in a folder on your computer, because then you can look at it on your computer desktop and you can put it into image editing software. You can make the image lighter or darker. You can enlarge it. You can enhance it. You could make it white on black writing instead of black on white writing. That might help. So you have some options of manipulating the image if you download it to your computer. Otherwise, when you try to print it, it can be very difficult to read. Printing doesn't always work so well with digital images, but if you have to print something, then I would say you could definitely print the transcribed copy.
Okay, I don't see any other questions right now.
All right.
I'll give everybody another minute or two to think of a question. Let you know that Lisa will be back 4 weeks from today on March 8th, talking about Irish ancestry. So if you'd like to join us for that, please feel free to register. This recording will be posted on the library's YouTube channel within the next week, probably. We're a little bit slower than usual right now, but should be up there within a week. And if you've registered for this, I will send you a link to that as soon as it's available.
Great.
And now we have another question. What is the shoebox?
The shoebox. The shoebox is a little thing that Ancestry has devised for you to be able to save records to look at later on. So say you come across something in your searches and you think, wow, okay, this could be significant, but it might not be exactly what I'm looking for. You can save it to the shoebox and you can go back to the shoebox and look at it later. I think what a lot of us have done without using the shoebox is now a lot of us just take the record and attach it to our tree. Even if we might not want to use it later, we can take it out. But the shoebox is a good place for putting things that might be something significant, but that you're not 100% sure of, and that you want to take some time to evaluate. So the shoebox is just a little container, an online container. Honestly, I haven't looked at my shoebox in forever, so I have no idea even what's in it. But certainly, it can be put to good use. Definitely can be put to good use.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. We've got, oh, no, here comes one. Does Ancestry allow printing whole or portion of a tree? Is this even practical?
No, I don't think they do, actually. I think what they try to push you towards, especially if it's your own tree, is they try to push you towards their printing service. So they don't really allow it. How people get around it is they take screenshots. So if you wanted to print a portion of a tree, you would take a screenshot, and you can do that by hitting the Shift key, the Windows key, and the S key all together if you're using a Windows PC. You can take a screenshot that way. There's also something called Snipping Tool, which you can download, and it's an app that will allow you to take a screenshot. Screenshot's going to probably be your best bet because it's going to allow you to get precisely the information you want. The printing function for trees from Ancestry is not great. One thing you can do that I think they allow you to do is they allow you to print a family group sheet. So if you go into a particular ancestor, and you may not be able to do this on anyone else's tree other than your own, but if you go into an ancestor and you click on them, there's an option to print a family group sheet. So that's possibility, but that's not really the tree. That's just a summary of a particular family. But I think in this case, screenshots are going to be your best bet.
Okay. We've got a thank you very much. You gave me some new ideas from the
Awesome.
participant.
One quick thing I just wanted to mention is in the month of March, I'm going to be posting some links on my Facebook page. And my intention is that I'm going to post a link every day to free resources that you can use for researching Irish ancestors. So I have a few things that I use on a consistent basis, and then other things that are just kind of interesting. So I'm going to have the aim of posting a link every single day during the month of March on my Facebook page, and that's Upstate NY Genealogy by Lisa Dougherty, if you haven't already liked it. And so you can take advantage of those links when I post them during the month of March.
That's great. Another thank you. I don't see any more questions popping up.
Okay.
Oh, just a bunch of thank yous. So that's very
Okay,
nice.
wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope to see everybody next month. And hopefully it'll be spring by then.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us, everyone. See you next month.